The Earth is changing. Temperatures are rising, storms are surging, fires are burning, and people are dying. The fact of the matter is, climate change is here now, and getting worse, but there are things we can do to reverse it if we act now. These days, climate change is a big buzzword, but what really is climate change, and how does it work?
So sunlight hits the earth, heats up the earth, and then heat's retained in the earth proportional to the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere.
This process is necessary to maintain the temperatures that sustain life. However, the same greenhouse gases that sustain life are now beginning to cause problems. With the increased burning of fossil fuels, greenhouse gases are on the rise. As humans drive cars, heat their homes, and turn on the lights, more and more greenhouse gases are released into the atmosphere. This throws the atmosphere out of balance and causes the climate to change.
Some of the biggest impacts are sea level rise, increasing heat waves, increasing intensity of rainstorms and hurricanes, wildfires.
According to a 2018 report by the United Nations, we have less than 12 years to take action before the effects of climate change are irreversible. Although the picture is bleak, we can combat climate change and save life as we know it if everyone makes small changes in their life. Even small changes can add up to big victories for the planet.
A lot of people, when you ask or talk about individual actions to combat climate change, like to cite the fact that there was a report that said something like 70% of carbon emissions come from about 100 companies. Those companies are able to do that and to make money because of consumer demand. And those 100 companies respond to consumer pressure.
There are a number of things, big and small, that you can do to reduce your carbon footprint. But the first step is calculating your footprint so you can pinpoint where your emissions are coming from.
So the biggest piece of advice that I have for people who are trying to reduce their impact on the climate is to find out what behaviors they're doing that have an impact on the climate. A good way to do that is to use an ecological or carbon footprint calculator. My favorite is www.footprintcalculator.org, but there's a ton of them out there, so find one that works for you. Most people's impacts are coming from three big buckets: transportation, diet, and then home energy use. So once you've figured out where your impact is coming from, you can start to identify behaviors that are going to reduce that impact.
If transportation is a large source of personal emissions, try biking or taking public transportation. If you have a large footprint from home energy, hang drying your clothes, replacing your light bulbs with energy-efficient ones, and installing low-flow faucets and shower heads are simple ways to combat your greenhouse gas emissions. If your diet is responsible for a large portion of your emissions, going vegetarian, growing a backyard vegetable garden, buying locally, and composting are great ways to reduce these impacts. There are also extreme measures you can implement, but keep in mind every small step counts.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said that for average people living in developed countries, there are 4 big actions that you can take that have a big impact. The biggest one is to not have children. Number 2 is to live without a car. Number 3 is to avoid 1 round-trip transatlantic flight. And number 4 is to eat a plant-based or vegan diet. Now, listening to those recommendations, I know that a lot of people feel like those are impractical options for them, and that's probably the case. In fact, when you talk about what's going to be most impactful, the reality is the most effective behavior change that you can make is the behavior change that you're going to be able to sustain over your entire lifetime.
In order to combat climate change on the scale necessary to save the planet, the government must also play a role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions nationally. Activism and involvement with local government are great ways for individuals to effect this larger change.
I'm Doug Bell, and I'm with Citizens Climate Lobby. We are laser focused on getting U.S. Congress to pass a carbon fee and dividend to address global warming. So we place a price on carbon so that when an amount of coal is taken from a coal mine, for example, that when burned creates a ton of carbon dioxide, we will place a tax on that. And the same thing with oil and natural gas. Whenever the tax would be applied at the source, at the wellhead, at the coal mine, at the oil well, so that when they extract an amount of material that when burned creates a ton of carbon dioxide, we would apply a tax on that. And that would just make not only fossil fuels such as gasoline, coal, natural gas more expensive, but it makes everything else made from them more expensive. And hopefully both companies and people will change their behavior and make different decisions. The dividend part is all of that revenue from that tax is returned equitably to all American households. Get onto our website, click the Join Us button, give us your name and your email, and then typically I will get every week an email of all the people who have registered, and I'll call them. We'll just have a 20-minute phone conversation. I'll put them on the Google list, and they're in.
Aside from the Citizens Climate Lobby, there are also other efforts to introduce legislation to combat climate change. One of these such efforts is the Sunrise Movement, a group of young people from around the nation who are pushing for a Green New Deal. Their plan is to shift the economy to 100% green energy within the next 10 years, while also ensuring green jobs for any American who wants one. Ever since the Green New Deal was introduced on February 7th, the movement has created a firestorm of young people pushing for government to take climate change more seriously. If this movement speaks to you, visit their website, www.sunrisemovement.org, to get involved. If you are interested in efforts to combat climate change at the local level, city governments across the country have programs to promote sustainable living.
There has been across the country a real movement by local leaders and local communities to mitigate climate change.
One of these such initiatives in the city of Cincinnati is a Year of Living Sustainably.
So the Year of Living Sustainably is a campaign that we're running out of the Office of Environment and Sustainability. It was a product of the 2018 Green Cincinnati Plan update that we did. And that was something where we called on the community to give us recommendations about how to make Cincinnati a more sustainable place to live, with the goal of reducing our carbon emissions by 80%. So there's a couple bigger components of the Year of Living Sustainably campaign that I want to share with you. The first one is our pledges. Each month we ask people to commit to an action and take a pledge. Try out a green behavior for 30 days, and the types of pledges vary from month to month. So they've got different topics. The second thing is that on our social media, which is on Facebook and on Twitter, we share daily tips for how to live sustainably, and we like to connect people through those platforms with different resources that are available for them here, specifically in Cincinnati. The last part of it is the community outreach events that we hold. So we have a couple recurring events that happen every month, but we also provide the opportunity for people who are interested in having an event in their own neighborhood to do so.
There are so many ways for individuals to get involved in the fight to combat climate change. From lifestyle change to activism, there is something out there for everyone. The important thing is that we act now, before it's too late.